Welcome to PWE Music. I'm Dr. Patrick Englert, and at this point you'll have seen and heard that we're shifting gears. We're going to check out some of the low clarinet etudes in our all-state video resource guide. So for this one, we're focusing on the Iowa All-State Etudes. This is number 6, the Allegro di Molto from the Weissenborn, arranged by Rhoads Advanced Studies. Let's get into it. So this is a pretty straight-ahead etude. Nothing too crazy going on with the fingers, with the rhythms, but here are a few points that we can consider when we're preparing this etude. First, I talk about this a lot, we want to be careful to avoid rushing. So if we look at the articulation pattern that we have throughout a lot of this etude, we have 2 eighth notes slurred together, but on the offbeat. This pattern can really kind of be a pitfall for rushing. When we're playing on the offbeat, we want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing ahead, a little more so than if it's just on the beat and squared up. So, of course, the main tool in our arsenal to work on this is practicing with the metronome. And however you want to do that, just make sure that we have that nice consistent pulse to keep us in check and help police ourselves while we're learning this and building that pulse so that we don't rush ahead with this articulation pattern. Second, one of the unique features about this etude is that towards the middle on the 1, 2, 3, 4, coincidentally, 5th system, we go into 5/4. So for those of you who haven't encountered this time signature before, don't worry, it's not as complicated as it may seem. The only difference really is instead of counting to 4, we count to 5. Because remember what our time signature tells us. Top number is how many. How many beats in the measure? In this case, 5. The bottom number is what kind. What kind of note gets that beat? This stays the same with 4 as the beginning, common time, or 4/4. So this same note gets the beat, and that is the quarter note. So like I said, rather than counting to 4, we just count to 5. We can keep the metronome the same, and the pulse remains the same. Like I said, we just count to 5 instead of 4. Nothing too complicated there. Third, as I said before with our comment about rushing, the offbeats are an important part of this etude. And one thing that will help us stay in time is getting started on the right foot. And that includes not gulping our breath right before we have an offbeat entrance. So, for instance, the very beginning. Rather than gulping and trying to breathe right before we need to play, get a good breath, get as good a breath as time will allow further in the piece, but especially at the beginning, get a good breath, and as you count in, make sure we're not gulping right before. If we gulp, not only do we get a late start, but we also don't get as deep of a breath as we need, and with the bigger instruments like this, we need all the air we can get. Next, let's talk about articulation. So in the first system, we have the 2 eighth notes slurred together, the second one receiving a staccato. It is not notated that way throughout the rest of the etude, but we do want to maintain that articulation style to maintain a consistent style throughout. So, with our articulation, we want to also consider the ending of the note. So what's going to help us stay in time, help us get that light feel as we cut off that staccato note, is make sure our tongue returns to the reed to stop the sound. We don't want to huff and puff with our air. We want our air to stay consistent. We want to use our tongue to articulate and get the separation we need for that staccato. So, on the first system, if we slow it down a lot, we're going to hear the tongue go back to the reed to stop the sound. So when we return the tongue to the reed, it's going to stop the sound with more control than if, like I said before, we huff and puff with the air. And it's going to give us the time to get our tongue back to the reed so that we can articulate the next thing and we don't become late. Building off of the previous point, we also want to make sure that we're working on getting our articulation as light as possible, especially if we're working on returning our tongue to the reed to get that staccato, to get that separation. We need to work on getting our tongue as light as possible, or we'll be slowing ourselves down just in a different way. So let's take the same example. If we have our tongue too heavy, it's a little too choppy, a little too chicken pecky. We want to have our tongue be nice and light so that when we speed it up, we don't slow ourselves down and we have a nice flow. We can stay in time, have it flow. So if we try to play it fast with a tongue that's too heavy, you can hear the rhythmic integrity kind of breaks down and we get a little more of a dotted 8th note, 16th note feel rather than straight 8th notes. So as I said before, this etude is pretty straightforward. It does require some practice with the fingers and the rhythms and the articulation to just get it up to a working tempo. But hopefully these points will help you in your preparation of that and will help get you that next level in your practice and in your performance. As always, if you have any questions or you think I missed something, drop them down in the comments. Be sure to subscribe so that you catch all the other videos in this series, and we'll catch you in the next one. Happy practicing.